Hi, I'm Gary Null, and this is a continuation of our Classrooms on the Air. Today, the theme is doing your part for the environment. I'm not talking just about global warming, which is the focus of most people's attention today, but rather the simple things that we take for granted, that if we did them individually and then collectively, it would make a difference. It was 12 years ago that I began a series on the program here. This series was called The Tipping Points, and at that time there were 12 tipping points. That means that once the damage to the environment, some aspect of the environment, maybe the bleaching of the coral reefs, which can affect billions upon billions of aqualife because they live on the coral reefs, they feed off the coral reefs. Once that's bleached, then that life ceases to exist. Now imagine all the hundreds of millions of people around the world that rely upon fishing in order to support themselves. They no longer have that opportunity. That's just one example. Another example is the fact that we are using so many things in life that we do not know how to dispose of. We assume that our plastic is going to be recycled. Only 5% of all the plastic is ever recycled. 95% goes into dumps or goes into the ocean, most of it in the ocean. In fact, there's a patch of plastic in the Pacific that is so large, it's 3 times the size of Texas. And what are we doing to clean that up? Nothing. What are we doing to encourage manufacturers to stop over-plasticizing everything? Nothing at all. How about making us more conscious of asking our legislators and then writing to the EPA and suggesting, why don't they show the dangers of all this plastic in the ocean? Because it's killing billions of fish, turtles, dolphins. But we're doing nothing about it. But we could. We choose not to. So now's the time, I believe, that we have reached the maximum tipping. That means that we've gone so far in our negligence and hubris and indifference that now something is so far into tipping, it's tipped, and therefore it can't be reversed. An example of that would be the warming of the Arctic and Antarctic and the Himalayas, all the major glaciers around the world. The ice is melting, and as a result, including in Canada, Alaska, the boreal forest areas around the world, including Norway, for example, and Russia, which is the largest, where you used to have solid ground because it was frozen for about 12,000 more or less years, 12,000 years. That meant that underneath that freezing of the land, there is peat, and peat, once it starts to burn, you just can't put it out. And as a result, that's very soft. I mean, you could sink in it. And so what happens when that melts, which it has? Then all the methane, which was trapped in that frozen soil, comes up. And we know that methane is far, far more of a pollutant to the air, causing global warming, than carbon dioxide. But all of our energy has been on carbon dioxide. None is on methane. Now, there's another problem, too. Historically, when the oceans froze, like the Arctic area, in the wintertime, it's very shallow. In some places, only 500 feet. And when the sun comes down, it hits the ice and bounces back harmlessly into the atmosphere. That's what we want. For example, where do you think all the water comes from that's in Lake Mead and Lake Powell and Hoover Dam, causing the generators there to produce hydroelectric water and the different turbines, and that creates the electricity for 7 million people, the water for 40 million people. I repeat, 40 million people. Well, it comes from the Colorado Rocky Mountains. And that means that snow gets packed on there, layer upon layer upon layer, over about a 4 or 5 month period. And then as it starts to melt, it doesn't melt all at once, it melts gradually. And therefore, as it melts, 2 or 3 inches melt, that goes down and goes into the river, helps fill some of the lower areas and also some of the aquifers. That's a good thing. But now that's not happening because we've been in severe drought, irrespective of the massive amount of rain, because probably 95% of that rain does not go to refilling our depleted water supply. We're still in the same drought. Yet we got all the rain and flooding recently in California and Washington State and Oregon, and that caused a lot of damage, caused deaths, caused flooding, flash flooding, caused whole areas of the cliffs overlooking the ocean to collapse into the sea. So we got all the worst of it, none of the best. We're still left with drought. And here's the problem. People are moving now to places where it's not environmentally sustainable. You can't live there. In fact, long ago, many of these states like Utah, California, Texas, Nevada, certainly South Dakota, and New Mexico, and Colorado, and Kansas, those are the worst hit. So too is Georgia and northern Florida. With excessive use of the water that's there, then where do you get new water? You don't. In fact, there's a community right near Phoenix that's run out of water completely. No water coming out of the taps. No water for irrigation or orchards. In fact, if you were to go to where I've been many, many times, driving from one end of California to the other, it's a beautiful state, wonderful people, but it used to be the number one place that people wanted the idyllic life. Beautiful weather all year round, the southern area of California, around down San Diego, Los Angeles, great beaches, surfing, northern California, the redwood forest. And it was just a perfect environment. Not now. They're on full fire alert 12 months a year, where thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres are burned, and a lot of homes in the process. So wouldn't you think that politicians would say, look, we cannot have any more developments, but they don't. We do not need any more property tax revenue. We have enough citizens, nearly 40 million, and we can get the property taxes from them, but they're not running their government very well out there. And as a result, running a deficit. As a result, instead of asking people to help them relocate to a more sustainable state, they're saying, come on in. As a result, you have more golf courses. And yet, when I drive up through the San Joaquin Valley, the breadbasket of America, in fact, I think it's the 7th leading economy in the world, California. And a lot of that is where we get our produce and where we get our almonds, for example, a lot of our citrus. Now you'll see thousands of acres being bulldozed. You'll see whole orchards just being pushed down to the ground, stacked in enormous piles and burned or chipped. And there's one community, it was called the Cantaloupe Center of America. That's where more cantaloupe were grown than any place else in America. And there were about 10,000 more or less citizens living there for decades. Now, turn on the water, nothing comes out. There's no water left. And so what happens is they have to get their water brought in by tankers. So it's really very scarce. And the place is very barren. So we've made two big mistakes. We overdevelop in natural settings that are beautiful, but we exploit them till all their natural resources are gone. And then we're left with a problem, what to do now. One of the most fastest growing communities in America is in Utah. Now, it gets its water from the same place that Lake Powell gets its water, and further down where you have Lake Mead and the Hoover Dam. Right now, the Hoover Dam is at its lowest point since it was created. Half of its turbines are turned off, and they believe that the drought continues. Within 12 to 24 months, it will be a dead pool, meaning The water will be, here would be your intake tunnels, the big concrete tunnels that take water in that feeds into the turbines. Up here is the water. So water, based upon gravitational pull, will go into the turbines. That's fine. Now the water is below some of these turbines. And within 1 to 2 years, depending upon use, depending upon rainfall and drought conditions, they won't be able to get any water. Lake Mead will cease to exist as a viable water source, as will Lake Powell. And the Hoover Dam will just be a tourist visit place of no functioning use. So where exactly are the 40 million people living, like in Arizona and in Nevada, California, and other states, to get that water? There's no plan B in motion. No one's asking anyone to move. To the contrary, in one community in the middle of the desert, in the high desert, where there's absolutely no rain, so to speak, they have built a community. The average home price, I believe, is around $1.6 million. So these are not working class homes. These are wealthy people and professional people's homes. And they're building, I think, their 12th golf course. But you're in a completely depleted environment. Why would you do that? I'll get to that later. I'm just telling you what is. And yet we don't see this as a national issue. For example, when was the last time anyone in an important position in government came forward to say, look, before this gets completely out of hand, why don't we have a national program to help support people in moving to a more sustainable state? And we've already got all these people looking for the best state parks because the state owns the park, or national forest where we can have a development area where, as long as there's soil and water, it can be sustainable, and we'll control the number of people allowed to live there. And no, we're not going to have private developers do this in some private public partnership, because it always works against the public when that happens. But we're not doing that at all. We're not even considering that. That's just one tipping point. Now you've got, we're overexploiting our own water resources in the United States. And also we're growing cotton in Arizona. Why in the world would we grow a crop that takes so much water, huge amounts of water? But nothing compares the amount of water that beef consume. In fact, it's about 1,200 gallons of water for one steak. One steak. So what if you had on a menu a black box that said, first off, here's what's wrong with eating meat. There's no fiber. It's loaded with chemicals. They even want to put additional chemicals so that the beef can grow faster and fatter to make more profit. But some of that can go right into your body and adversely affect your microbiome, your bacteria, because it destroys it. But also, because meat has no fiber, it can cause congestion in your intestine, constipation. That causes inflammation. That can cause polyps. That can cause colorectal cancer. And that's a leading cause of death in the United States, completely preventable. It's not genetic. But also, you're getting too much protein. How much protein do you need? Well, it's not the protein you need the amino acids, the building blocks of protein. So if I show you, let's say, 20 grams of protein from a can of, let's say, black soybeans, okay, and I show you 20 grams of protein from meat, do you know that that 20 grams of protein be like one forkful, one fork? Why? Because it's 28.35 grams to an ounce. And let's just say that you're wanting 20 grams. Okay, you're getting almost 1 ounce, or about 20 grams in one bite. So if you had 2 bites, you're up around 55 to 60 grams. For the average American, now I'm 6'2", I weigh 170 pounds, I have very little body fat, I'm an athlete. But still, I'm able to get all my amino acids, all my protein in grains, whole grains, beans, lentils, and pulses, and which are very inexpensive. So it saves a lot of money. It would save the average American about 35% on your food bill each week if you ate vegan, healthy, organic, locally grown produce. Now, because it has a lot of fiber, the protein I'm getting, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds, a handful of walnuts, protein, but essential fatty acids for your heart, your arteries, your brain. And when I'm eating, let's say, I'm having some coconut. The coconut has a wonderful type of fat, and that fat helps protect my brain. And my immune system has antiviral properties. Most people don't know that. In fact, almost everything you need for ideal health, you'll find in a healthy plant-based diet, but especially lots of fiber, anywhere from 25 to 45, even 50 grams protein, depending upon your needs and your body size. But that means that the food goes through what is called a peristalsis, wave-like rhythmic movement that is based upon electrical and chemical impulses that cause the food to move. Otherwise, when you ate something, it just sit in the stomach, but it doesn't. It digests and goes into the intestine, and it moves slowly through, and it's slowly in the form of almost a soup. And how does it get through there? Fiber, soft fibers like blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, cherries, apple fibers, terrific for you. But then nut fibers, legume fibers are also good, each one involving a different type of digestive process, and some having prebiotics, meaning not only did you eat a good meal that tastes good, it was good for you, but it also recolonized good bacteria into your gut, the biome, what is called the microbiome. And there are trillions, I mean trillions of these bacteria. Those bacteria send messages to the brain, to the overall immune system to strengthen it. So the more probiotics you have, the prebiotics you have, the healthier you're going to be. Now, so when you're eating the meat, you're eating something that is dead. It doesn't have the enzymes. It doesn't have vitality of vegetables and fruits and grains, nuts and seeds. It's just protein. And we've been conditioned to believe we need it. We don't need that protein at all. And how do I know that? Because I am the scientist at the Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Applied Biology and Director of the Anti-Aging Division, where I did a study. And it was just a simple study. I had been to South America, I've been to the rainforest, been to Venezuela and Brazil, and I wanted to know, how is it that people are not taking vitamins, are not doing yoga or Pilates, are not meditating, are living long and healthy lives with rare to none of the common diseases we suffer from. You go to East Africa, you go into the bush, and you ask the Bushman, the Kalahari, when was the last time you saw diverticulitis, constipation, spastic colon, breast cancer, lung cancer? They just look at it like, what? We don't have those. Why not? It's not genetic. It's their lifestyle. So I wanted to see, how are these people being so healthy the older they get? I saw a man who was 74 years old, and we'd gotten some sunburn. We didn't realize how hot it was and how much sun was getting through the canopy of the forest onto our skins. So he said, wait a minute. He ran up a tree. I mean, he just climbed right up that tree, no ropes, no cleats, and threw us down a bunch of baby coconut. He then came down, opened up the coconut, and instead of having the coconut milk, it was like a clear water. So he said, drink this. We drank it. And then he scooped out, looked like a gel, clear gel. And he said, put this on. This will take your burn away. And indeed it did. All over our face and scalp and arms, hands, no burn. But what amazed me was that this guy had abs. He had defined muscles. He had no diseases. We talked with him at length. I want to know how that happened. So I saw one of the items in his diet was rice and beans and cassava root and breadfruit root, a lot of root vegetables. So I got these local markets and I analyzed the protein content. And I was working on some beans in particular. These were black beans. And I just wanted to measure the nitrogen levels, the amino acids. How much protein does this cup of beans have? Well, the next morning, my results, I said, well, I made a mistake. So I asked Dr. Berman, I said, Vic, I've made a mistake here calculating amino acids. Could you redo it for me today? He didn't. When I came in that evening, it said, no mistake. It's accurate. I said, that can't be. Why couldn't it be? Because the very textbook, Normal and Therapeutic Nutrition, that I had to use and study to graduate from dietetic school to become a registered dietitian earlier in my career, said, and it's an outstanding textbook by Robinson, it said that only animal proteins are complete and that fruits and vegetables are incomplete and some are very incomplete. So hence justifying why home economics teachers were telling parents, mainly the mothers, make sure that your child has 3 servings of meat a day, 3 servings of dairy a day, and 3 servings to 4 servings of bread products a day, pastas, white bread, etc. And that's how we lived for the past 50 years. I found it was all wrong. It was completely wrong, mainly because of the influence, the egg industry, the meat industry, the dairy industry, the sugar industry, all had lobbyists deciding with the USDA what the food chart should be, the food pyramid. Now, I ended up redoing my work about 10 times. And then I asked a Dr. Fiske from another university, who was a friend, and he agreed. He said, nope. And I thought, wow, think of that for a moment. In that moment, I had this strange feeling. How could all of nutritional science, dietetic science, have been wrong for all these decades? Because there are 8 essential amino acids, 9 if you're pregnant. And that means your body can't produce them. You have to take them in, exogenous versus endogenous sources. You take them in. And hence fish, beef, pork, veal, chicken, eggs, dairy. Those were your sources of your protein. And that's what we loaded up on. And where I grew up, I don't know about you, but I grew up in West Virginia. People pretty much all ate the same food. And there were butcher shops back then all throughout the town. And generally everyone within a vicinity went to that butcher shop. Like there was a place that had dairy, all your cheeses and ice cream and milkshakes and milk. And we got milk delivered to our home every morning. And so you went to different places to get your different foods. And you felt that because you were getting this locally and fresh, that it was going to be good. Just the opposite. Because we weren't getting the fruits and vegetables into the diet, the nuts and seeds into the diet, the pulse, legumes and beans into the diet. It was pretty much a meat and potatoes meal. In fact, I never saw a meal where I grew up where you didn't have either bread as toast in the morning. And of course, when you take any bread, any carbohydrate, and you heat it to a high temperature, you create some very toxic products. And one of those is called acrylamides, and that can cause cancer. It causes your body to age prematurely. That's the scientific literature. And that's why on a healthy diet, you want to go for a period of at least 3 months, trying to get as many raw foods and juices into your body as possible. Lots of salads with onions and ginger, fresh ginger shaved off into salad, and lemon juice and apple cider vinegar, which is also prebiotic, good for your gut. But we didn't. I'd watch my mother take some white flour, put it into a skillet, because it stunk. I wanted to see what smelled. So I'm a kid. I get a chair, and I stand up on the chair and I look over, see what my mom was doing. And she has this box, and she sprinkles this red powder. I said, what's that? She said, that's cow's blood. And then she throws some cream in there, and some salt, lots of salt and pepper. And she stirs it around and it kind of bubbles. Oh, God, it was gross. But then that's the gravy that she puts into the mashed potatoes. And everybody got muffins. And again, these were just white flour products, pure sugar when it digests. And so I would watch my dad eat a 2-inch steak. Now, why a 2-inch steak? I believe it was because to show that you were really in the working blue-collar middle class, that you could afford for your family a 2-inch steak. And so you go into the butcher shop and he'd just be, here's your steaks. Because I was the one who had to run and get all this stuff and bring it home. Now, the idea was the taste in food comes from fat. And hence, that's why you have so much fat in so many foods you like potato chips and French fries and pretzels and all forms of other confections. It's the fat. They used to add a lot of lard. That's the worst kind of fat. In any case, so we were eating way too many calories with too much salt, and we didn't have the fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. No, my dad would eat all this. And so just do the math. Minimally, it's 16 ounces. All right, probably more. And down in Texas, when I bought my ranch down in Tauga, Texas, they prided themselves in having restaurants that give you a 2-pound steak. And people go in there and unbuckle their buckle and unbuckle their top button of their shirt. I guess they should have had someone just with a plunger, we'll get it down. You know, you're, God. In any case, so now I'm sitting in the lab and I just start to do a little calculation, 28.35 grams to an ounce. Let's just say 28 grams to an ounce. And let's say that half of that steak is fat and half of it's protein. All right, that's 8 ounces. So just do the math. 8 times 28. Wow. That's an entire week's worth of protein requirements in one meal, in one item. And over 2,000 calories just from that one meal. And we wonder why people were getting fat. It was our diet, wasn't genetics. Because when people went on a diet and began to be concerned about their health and weight and looks, appearance, strength, then they lost the weight easily and they kept it off until they didn't. So I share this with you for a simple reason, because when you think about how much damage a meat-based diet has caused us, how many lives have been lost to strokes, heart attacks, colorectal cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, because these are high in estrogen. And you start driving estrogen, you're driving cancer right behind it. Prostate cancer, breast cancer, and ovarian cancer right at the top of that list. But then obesity comes with that too, because of all the fat. Because I watched my dad, he would just take his muffin and just make sure that all of that fat was on there so he could eat it. Oh, now put it in proper perspective. When you decide you no longer want to take the life of a sentient creature, a cow or pig or chicken. And I live here in a sanctuary between here, upstate New York, at the Fertler Farm, the Healing Springs Ranch. I've rescued over 5,000 animals, mainly when their sanctuaries went bankrupt, then dropped them off, emaciated, frequently abused, breeding farms went broke. They just leave these poor overbred animals that were just living in trauma. And with lots of love and kindness and a healthy diet, brought them back to life and find them a loving home for life. You start to see how intelligent animals are. My brother Howard was an animal whisperer. He had a unique gift. I remember once there was a place that you could go and pay a fee and shoot animals. They were just sitting there grazing. I mean, what cowards would do that? It's just spineless. And anyhow, they gone broke. So The animals were really suffering. So they gave us a call. We went down, got our trucks, brought them all up to Texas. Now, these are wild creatures, and they're headed by the big bull, the big alpha male. He was big. And if you even go near them, he'll charge. My brother walked right out there, walked right up to him, put his hand on his forehead, and this big buffalo just sat on the ground. Howard just sat there with him for a long period of time. My brother communicated at a different level, and he did this with all the animals. In any case, we had a cow, big cow, and she was known as a perfect breeder. And she was in the middle of the field. And again, farm went broke, and they asked us, would we take the animals? We did. They couldn't afford to feed them. And here was this gentle creature, just so gentle. And my dog, called Beautiful, Miniature Dotson, went over to her, and she was licking Beautiful's face. And then next time I looked out in the field, there was Beautiful laying up there on her back. And they became best friends. But you could go out. I had friends that would go out and lay in the pasture under a tree where she was sitting there chewing her cud. They'd just lean back and go to sleep. And they could feel the heartbeat. And when you think this is a wonderful thinking creature, you get up and you call her name, she'll come right over to you. And you can nuzzle with her. Why would you think that creature should be on a plate and you eating it? You see, we've desensitized ourselves. Let me put it another way. If you want a meat-based diet today, why don't you take your dog and cat to the butcher and say, today, we'll get rid of these two. I need my protein. No, you wouldn't allow that. Your pets are part of your family. You know they'll never betray you. They'll always love you. They'll be there every second of every day for you. Why would you think that another type of creature wouldn't be the same? They are. They're all the same. There's some videos up there showing you people who raised wild animals from babies, but then had to give them up, put them back in nature. They went back into nature. They went into Africa. They went into the jungles, found those creatures that they raised, and look at the response. Chimpanzees coming over and crying and hugging, and lions doing the same. There's one that really is interesting. Two guys in England raised this baby lion from a cub when her mother rejected her until she was too big several years later to be kept in the community. They wouldn't allow it. So they got her to Africa where she could be a part of the natural world. 7 years went by, I think. They went to Africa, and they took them a while to find it where she had been established. And up on a mountain area, there she was. She came running down the mountain. She saw them and just couldn't stop loving them. Okay, that's heartwarming. But then as I'm watching, I've noticed something else. All those other lions that were with her in her pride, they came too. And they were raised. I'm thinking, oh, this is not going to end well. But to the contrary, based upon the relationship she had with these two guys, the other animals just sniffed them and no attacks, nothing. That was of interest because I helped raise Kokomo Jr. Kokomo used to appear after Mr. Muggs on the Dave Garroway show on NBC in the mornings. And I befriended the person who owned Kokomo Jr., and he didn't have the time, so I spent a lot of time with her. And I taught her over 169 different words that she could relate to. And she'd tell me which movie she wanted to see, which toy she wanted to play with. And she would show you with her hand. She could respond. A deep intellect there. I wrote a manuscript on it called From Instinct to Intellect, the Study of Primates. In any case, why do I share all this with you? Because I want you to know, before you have your next chicken or fish or veal, that an animal had to suffer needlessly in order for you to have it. And you didn't need it. And I'm the one who created the science to prove that. In fact, I was able with Dr. Fitzke to create 5,000 combinations of food in normal eating size that exceeded any protein you could get from any animal source. In fact, it was so specific that the project was called the Egg Project. Why did I call it the Egg Project? Because up until that moment, the highest standard of protein recognized in the diet was the egg, meaning the net protein utilization, meaning the actual amount of protein that you got out of an egg was higher than any other source. It was up around 96, 97, and mine went to 99. So I remember I did a press conference and about 700 people showed up from my audience, but also a woman from the UN showed up and she said, not only can you now show that you don't have to send dry milk, which a lot of people in Africa are allergic to, where they make their formula because mothers can't breastfeed, but can you also show how in arid climates you can combine the grains and legumes together to make a protein better than milk that is non-allergenic? I said, of course. I gave her all that information. What happened with it, I don't know. I didn't follow up on that. But just understand something. No one has to consume anything with a heartbeat or a face. And if you doubt me, just read the book I wrote in the scientific article published in a peer-reviewed journal called The Egg Project. That was years ago. But why haven't more people become vegans? They haven't. More people are eating more meat than ever before. We've increased the amount of meat. That's because we no longer are interested in the truth and facts, especially if they challenge us, because we're locked into our comforts. We don't want to change. We want change, but we don't want to change. Now, when you have all that meat out there, billions and billions and billions of animals every year, that's methane from their flatulence going into the atmosphere. That's a big polluter, major cause of global warming, major. So what if we just decided, I no longer need meat. In fact, there are no studies in the scientific literature showing the more meat you eat, the healthier you are. But there's a lot of studies, thousands of studies showing that the Mediterranean diet or vegan plant-based diet prevents disease and helps your immune system. But meat actually contributes to disease. And milk creates mucus, lots of it. And that's not healthy. So the industry will not change itself. There's too much money in it, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. But you can change. And if you and other people begin to change and give up animal proteins, then we're not going to be polluting the environment. If we're not polluting the environment, then there's going to be less of that nitrogen, and there's going to be more healthy living. So therefore, the global warming is not going to be melting very rapidly all the Rockies and the Himalayas, causing too much water to flow. Most of it's wasted, not used. And now we have too little snowpack, too little. So let me just show you what I'm talking about here. When you say, I don't need to eat meat anymore, anything from an animal, because they're sentient beings, I'm going to honor my spiritual self. If I honor my dog and cat and bird and fish in the bowl, then I'm not going to eat them. And I'm not going to eat other animals as well. Good. That means you're going to make a change based upon a spiritual connection, which is more than a fad or hobby that you can relapse on. Next, you don't need the protein from this. Too much protein causing disease. So you're going to eat more of a healthy plant-based diet to prevent and reverse disease. Even better. Now, all the land that all those billions of animals require in order to grow, that land now can be reused growing trees, which act as carbon sinks. We could grow billions of trees, which would substantially reduce the heat going up and cause more of a stable climate. That means that all that heat's not melting the ice, causing that ice on the mountains and ranges and glaciers in Antarctica and Greenland and Iceland and the Arctic area and the boreal forest to melt, which causes the permafrost to melt, allowing all that methane up. So we're protecting that. That ice in the wintertime would reflect solar energy back in. But if the ice melts, which is not good, then the sun goes right down in that shallow water and heats up the frozen base of the Arctic, and that causes countless amounts of nitrogen come up. You're getting, when the sun comes down and there's no ice and it goes in there, then it heats up the permafrost at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean, and that allows methane, bubbles, clathorates to come up in countless numbers, 24/7. That then gets a feedback loop. More sun goes in the ocean, the warmer it gets, the more methane is released, the more warm it gets, etc. And that causes a tipping point to where one day we don't have ice in the Arctic as we did. We don't have ice on the mountains. And too hot. It's melted. We have massive drought. With massive drought comes enormous forest fires because the trees need water. They're not getting them. With one tree dying and not being cut down, the beetles that infest that tree can spread within 150 feet and get other trees. That means an entire forest can be destroyed, and that's what we're seeing. So you see, there is a consequence to your actions. Where you live makes a difference if you're contributing to global warming or not. What you do by eating a healthy diet, a plant-based diet, contributes not only to your health, but also the health of the environment, the health of the soil. When you stop buying clothes made in Bangladesh and have clothes that you only need, then we're not going to be buying 900 million garments a year just in the United States, just from Bangladesh. That doesn't even count China or India. So you see, every choice you make, from stop buying so much stuff, stop buying stuff that's all already plasticized, too much plastic on it. Just a little battery pack that costs you $4 has plastic so much on it, you got to get scissors and cut the darn stuff. And use paper and reuse clothes and go to some of the stores where they have clothes you could repurpose and buy them and go and take them to your local tailor and have them refitted on you. I do that all the time. So I can't remember the last time I went into a store and bought anything. I buy fabric and I design it myself. And I have a seamstress sew it for me. I do one fitting and then I've got something made in USA, something I designed, something that people were paid a living wage, not exploited. Or I'll go to in fact, a friend of mine was going to the Cannes Film Festival, had no clothes to wear, wanted to go to the different parties and try to hand out, it's called a pirate marketing, where this person is not invited, but the film's a good film, but it's a small independent film. How do you get anyone to pay attention to it? Well, you got to go mix. How do you do that? You have to go to their parties. So this person said, what do I do? I said, well, first of all, call an agency over there in France, in the immediate area, and ask what would it cost to hire a male model for the evening, or 3 evenings, 4 evenings. Okay. Then took this person over to 3rd Avenue and in the 80s, and there's upstairs, the whole floor of beautiful designer clothes that someone bought originally or had made. Some of these are thousands of dollars. And this person was able to buy 4 different dresses, shoes, the whole outfits All of it for $900, $150, $200 a dress for $2,000 to $3,000 dresses. Christian Dior, Valentino, all the best names. But that just took a little time. Took it to a seamstress, had it recut to fit her, and it worked. It worked. They got into all the parties. They got some people. Remember, she said Nick Nolte, watched the film and liked it. Repurpose things. Stop relying upon all services. All that creates pollution. Where do you think all the clothes go that we don't use in the United States? Do your part. Be conscious. And yet the very people, younger people, follow. Like Jenner, the youngest Jenner sister, she's a billionaire, and she has a big jet, not a little jet, a huge jet. And yet recently she was criticized for taking her jet, what would have been like a 25-minute car ride. She had the jet fly to a local airport. Why? But I'm told that all the Kardashians have their own private jet. Why? And yet she has one room of just over 1,000 pairs of shoes. She has over 200 million followers. And yet there's nothing in her lifestyle that I've been able to see that's healthy. All of it is based upon a kind of social decadency. See me, see what I own. And people, yeah, that's cool. I want to own that too. Then how in the world do you follow someone like that and emulate them, and then at the same time be environmentally conscious? They're contradictions. Good for Bill Maher for explaining his own hypocrisy of flying private, but also all the other people. He said if people could afford to fly private, they would. And one of the reasons people are motivated to earn more money is so they can fly private. That's not everyone. I know a lot of very conscientious people, myself included, who could afford to fly private. We wouldn't, because though it may be good for us, it's not good for the environment. And yet Leonardo DiCaprio and all these other individuals, including Al Gore, they fly private. It creates an enormous amount of heat-causing gases. Why they're doing this, I can't tell you that. But just be aware, the less traveling you do, the better it is for the environment. Just being conscious, that's all we want to do today, to do your part. So find some of the stuff I talked about to see if you might go to your local Chamber of Commerce and say you would like to start a local program of getting teenagers to plant trees. Let the city or the state provide you with some acreage and resources for young trees so you can plant them. Do your part. Now, live better with less. Live for quality of life, not a standard of living. And do not use the Kardashians as examples of how you should live your own life. Just my thoughts, my opinions. Take a look at all the articles, over 980 and counting, that I've written on GaryNull.com. And go to PRN.Live for some of the best programming you'll ever see. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.
If you would like to stay updated and see more content, you can follow PRN on Twitter at live.prn and YouTube at Progressive Radio Network. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you again for listening to PRN, the home of progressive voices.